If you're a skilled professional looking to move to Australia in 2025, but you're unsure if your profession is in demand in Australia, or indeed how difficult could it be to move here, then this video is for you. G'day guys, my name's Ross and I moved with my family to Australia over 4 years ago. And since then, I've been helping people to move to the beautiful land down under, just like me. Now, whilst you can't exactly predict which professions are going to be allowed into Australia next, you can get a pretty good indication by what professions were invited during the last round. And just so that we understand what we're talking about here, in this video we are going to cover the 189 Independent Skilled Visa, the 491 Skilled Regional Work Visa, and the Skilled Nominated Visa Subclass 190. For each of these visas, you're going to have to complete a skills assessment to prove that you can do those jobs, as well as submit an expression of interest or an EOI to let the Australian government know that you want to move here. Once all of that has been done, the Australian government will then invite you to apply for a visa, and in November 2024 last year, there were 15,000 invites for various different professions. Here are the list of professions that were the hardest to get into Australia, and that's because they required 95 points in order to move here. Before we start, if you want to make a guess at what professions you think might end up on this list, make sure you leave it in the comments down below, and then we'll give you all a little round of applause when we find out that you're right. Please don't consider this as actual visa advice, because I'm just some secondary school teacher talking on YouTube. So first on that list, if you're an accountant, that's like a general accountant, that would have got you into Australia, but only on 95 points. Next on the list, if you're a computer systems and network engineer, I got that wrong. If you're a computer network and systems engineer, I don't know how they're different. That would have also allowed you to move to Australia on 95 points. Sticking with the theme of computers, if you're a developer programmer, apparently they're different but the same, that would have also allowed you to move to Australia on 95 points. And then the first of our trades, if you're a diesel motor mechanic, because apparently it's in demand, but they've got a few of them still in Australia, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia on 95 points. Now moving on to the E's, if you're an electronics engineer, that would have got you an invite to Australia on 95 points, as would if you're an ICT business analyst or an ICT security specialist, because they're also on 95 points. Now sticking with the theme of accountants, but remember not general accountants now, but if you're a management accountant, that would have got you an invite into Australia on 95 points. Now, whilst in the previous video I covered a lot of medical profession type of jobs that were able to get here on 70 points or less, it seems that if you work in healthcare management, it's not so much in demand. But if you're a primary health organisation manager, which I'm assuming is healthcare management somewhere, then you could have got an invite to move to Australia on 95 points last year. Moving on to S, if you're a software engineer, that's an engineer that works with software, I assume, you would have got an invite to move to Australia on 95 points last November. As would, staying with S, a systems analyst. So many of these ICT jobs just seem like they're the same. Is that why it's on 95 points as well? Now, if you are any of those professions and you are interested in moving to Australia and you have absolutely no idea where you could start, or if you're looking to see, is there a way that I could get here and have even more points, then maybe you need to speak to our friends True Blue Migration Services, who could be able to help you. They're one of Australia's oldest, largest and most professional group of MARA registered agents with backgrounds in Australia and all over the world. So they have an in-depth knowledge of the migration system and how to maximize your application with the most amount of points. I know that when I first wanted to move to Australia, I had to use a visa agent because I had no idea what I was doing and what counted for points. So I know that if I didn't use them, not only would it probably have taken me a lot longer than the initial 10 years of wanting to move here, the actual visa time only took a few years. Don't worry, it's not 10 years to get a visa. But it could potentially have taken longer because they wouldn't have told me the extra ways that I could have maximized the amount of points when submitting my application. So if you're any one of those professions or any of the ones that are about to come up that I'm going to tell you that got invites on 90 points, make sure to check their details down in the description below. Send in your CV or resume and they'll be able to tell you for free exactly what your visa options are for moving to Australia. And then because you've mentioned us, when you realize how wonderful their service is, not only will they be able to manage you through every step of the application process, but you will also save an additional $200 off the cost of your visa. You're welcome. Now, if those were the professions that got you into Australia on 95 points last year, what are the ones that are ever so slightly easier to get in? So on 90 points, starting at Z because I'm lazy, is a zoologist. There's loads of zoos in Australia, but apparently no one wants to work in them. So at 90 points, that would have got you in last year. Next on the list is a valuer. I'm assuming they just go around and tell you how expensive stuff is. Stuff in Australia can be really expensive. But valuers, I'm not sure what they're valuing. That profession would have got you into Australia on 90 points last year. Now, sticking with the teaching profession, which always seems to be reasonably in demand in Australia, but if you're a university lecturer, and you've got 90 points, that would have got you into Australia last year. Now we have a couple with the T's, and these seem to be a bit like tongue twisters. But if you're a telecommunications technical officer or technologist, apparently that's all one profession, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia on 90 points, as would a telecommunications network planner. Slightly easier to say, but also the same on 90 points. Now, because we need more houses and new estates seem to be thrown up everywhere at the moment, probably not at the rate that some people would like, but we need more surveyors in Australia, and that would have got you an invite to move to Australia on 90 points. Now, here's a profession that I didn't really know was a profession, but I guess it's for people that were good at maths at school. And if you're a statistician, I wonder what picture is going to come up when I Google that job, but statisticians would have got an invite to Australia on 90 points at the end of last year. And continuing with the jobs that kind of link to subjects that you were good at school, but if you're a physicist, is that like the Big Bang Theory? That would have got you an invite to move to Australia last November on 90 points. Or if you're not quite a physicist, but you understand the physics of space and you're an other spatial scientist, yeah, apparently that's a thing, then it would have got you an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. And again, keeping with the theme of healthcare, but perhaps the not so in-demand professions, if you're an obstetrician or a gynecologist, that would have got you an invite to Australia, but only on 90 points last year. Now, there is one job on here that I haven't included, but I've just noticed it, and it seems to be the most obscure job moving to Australia, because to get an invite, you would need 115 points. I don't even know how you would get that many points. But if you're a nursing clinical director, is that like the top nurse? Well, apparently they need them in Australia, but you wouldn't get an invite unless you had 115 points. If you're a nursing clinical director with 115 points, let me know, because that must be like a unicorn. Now, starting with the ends, if you're a naval architect, is that someone that designs boats? Well, they would be accepted into Australia last year on 90 points, as would a natural and physical science professional, NEC. What is the NEC bit? Can someone tell me? But natural and physical science professionals would get an invite to Australia if they had 90 points last year. Moving on to M's, if you're a musician that's instrumental and you wanted to move to Australia last year, you would have got an invite if you had 90 points, as would a music director. What do you have to do to be a music director? Is that like musicals or is it any music? But they would get an invite to move to Australia on 90 points. Now, something that seems like lots of people want to work in if they live in Australia, but it still has reasonably high demand if you're looking at applying from overseas, is a mining engineer, excluding petroleum. So if you work with petroleum, you're buggered. You may or may not need more or less than 90 points to live in Australia. Continuing with the sciences, if you're a microbiologist, that would have got you an invite to apply to move to Australia on 90 points, as would a meteorologist. Now, that is a profession that I swear they sometimes get it wrong. Bureau of Meteorology. Sometimes they say there's going to be a storm when there's not a storm, and then there's a storm when they say there isn't going to be a storm. Apparently they need meteorologists on 90 points. If you work with metal, then here's some professions that are ever so slightly in demand. If you're a metallurgist, that would get you into Australia last year on 90 points, as would a metal machinist with an army rank of first class. You don't need the army rank, that was a joke from the previous video. They'd also have got an invite to Australia on 90 points last year. If you're a marine biologist and you've always wanted to work in the marine waters of Australia, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia on 90 points. Or if you're a scientist to do with life, like a life scientist, NEC, or a life scientist general, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. Moving on to I, if you're an internal auditor, I guess that's someone that audits things internally, you'd have got an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. Now, one thing that Australia seems to struggle with at times is flooding. So if you're a hydrogeologist, I'm assuming that's something slightly to do with flooding, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia on 90 points. Or if you're still good at working with the ground and you're a geophysicist, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia on 90 points. And if you like to work with trees, not necessarily cutting them down, and you're a forester, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. Continuing with the Fs, and you like to work with food, if you're a food technologist, I don't know, is that someone that comes up with new flavors and types of food and stuff? That would have got you a move to Australia last year on 90 points. Now, when we did the previous video, it seemed like nurses seem to be quite in demand, still moving to Australia. But another profession that is in demand, but not so much because it's on 90 points, seems to be the ones that are starting with environment. So I'll start listing them now. If you're an environmental scientist, NEC, or an environmental research scientist, or an environment manager, or an environmental consultant, I know it's not environment, it's close environmental. All of those jobs would have got you an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. As would an engineering manager. That's also on 90 points as well. Now, something that's a little bit more technical, I guess, only because the title's really long. But if you're an electronic instrument trades worker, special class, not just the peasant ones, then that would also get you an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. as would an electrical engineering technician and an electronical engineering draftsperson, someone that draws all the electrical engineering, I assume. Both those trades would have got you an invite to Australia last year on 90 points. Slowly getting closer to A, but we're still on E. If you're an economist, someone who works in the economy, I guess, that would have got you an invite to move to Australia last year on 90 points. Now, this next job, I'll let you decide. Is it something which we really need, but they're still inviting people if they do this on 90 points, is a dancer or choreographer. I don't make up this list, it's the Australian government. Continuing the theme of subjects that you were good at school, if you're a chemist and you want to move to Australia, you might be able to get in on 90 points as well. Nearly towards the end of this list, I don't know, how did you get on? Did you put down what professions you thought were in demand but quite obscure? Tell us in the comments down below. But if you're a boat builder and repairer, you're about as in demand as those naval architects, who are also on 90 points. Chemists, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, so close because I'm a biochemist. Well, you've also got here into Australia last year on 90 points as well. But apparently in Australia there isn't enough culture, so as well as dancers or choreographers, they also need arts administrators or managers. Doesn't matter which one you are, they'll both get you an invite to move to Australia on 90 points. And the last two professions, I guess, are linked to the fact that Australia prides itself on being so food secure. But if you're an agricultural scientist or an agricultural engineer, you could also get to move to Australia last year on 90 points. Now, don't worry if you've not heard your professional trade on this list, because these were the hardest jobs to get an invite to move to Australia last year as a permanent resident. If you're left wondering, I want to move to Australia, but I don't know what the best route for me is, then make sure to speak to our friends True Blue Migration Services, go onto their website, mention us, and when you upload your CV or resume, they'll be able to tell you for free exactly what your best options are for moving to Australia. And because you mentioned us, they'll also save you $200 off the cost of it. And if you're thinking to yourself, what actually are the easiest jobs to get permanent residency in Australia? Because that's probably something that you're thinking about. Make sure you check out this video. I'll see you next time.